Good morning, students. In relation with new historicism, you should be familiar with three more names, and they are also associated with another part of your literary theory, that is nationalism and post-colonial studies, as also subaltern studies. They are Partha Chatterjee, Gyan Prakash, and Deepesh Chakravarti, and all three are actually part of the subaltern collective, and which is actually notable for their anti-essentialist approach to history and politics. The Subaltern Studies Group or Subaltern Studies Collective is a group of South Asian scholars interested in the post-colonial and the post-imperialist societies. Their anti-essentialist approach is one of history from below, that is, focus more on what happens among the masses at the base levels of society than among the elite. The term subaltern alludes to the work of Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci, and the term's semantic range has evolved from its first usage by Ranajit Guha to refer solely to peasants who had not been integrated into the industrial capitalist system. It now refers to any person or group of inferior rank or station, whether because of race, class, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, or religion. I think you are already familiar with Partha Chatterjee. Anyway, I'll make a brief reference to him and his works. Partha Chatterjee was born on November 5th, 1947. He was an Indian political scientist and anthropologist, and he was director of the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta, from 1997 to 2007, and continues as an honorary professor of political science. He was also a professor of anthropology and South Asian studies at Columbia University and a founder member of the Subaltern Collective. The important works are: 1. The Nationalist Thought and the Colonial World, a derivative discourse, which appeared in 1986. And it is from this particular text that the extract you have to study, that is nationalism as a problem in the history of political India, is taken. So he is important for you in another part of your literary theory. The essay prescribed for you is Nationalism as a Problem in the History of Political India. It is taken from the text Nationalist Thought and the Colonial World, a Derivative Discourse, which appeared in 1986. Other important works are The Nation and Its Fragments, Colonial and Post-Colonial Histories, which appeared in 1993. Texts of Power, 1995, A Possible India, 1997, The Present History of West Bengal, 1997, The Politics of the Governed, Popular Politics in Most of the World, 2004, Empire and Nation, Selected Essays, 2010, Lineages of Political Society, 2011, Lineages of Political Society, Studies in Postcolonial Democracy, 2011. The Black Hole of Empire, History of a Global Practice of Power, appeared in 2017. Another important figure was Gyan Prakash, born in 1952, and he was a historian of modern India and Dayton Stockton Professor of History at Princeton University, and he's a member of the Subaltern Collective. And his field of research concerns urban modernity, genealogies of modernity, and problems of post-colonial thought and politics. He writes about modern South Asian history, comparative colonialism and post-colonial theory, urban history, global history, and the history of science. He has written several books, including Mumbai Fables, which appeared in 2010, which was adapted into the 2015 film Bombay Velvet, directed by Anurag Kashyap. Important works are Bounded Histories, Genealogies of Labor, Servitude in Colonial India, 1990. Another Reason, Science and the Imagination of Modern India, 1999. Worlds Together, Worlds Apart, A History of the Modern World, 1300 to the Present, 2002. Modern Fables, 2010. Emergency Chronicles, Indian Gandhi and Democracy's Turning Point, 2019. An edited work, After Colonialism, Imperial Histories and Post-Colonial Displacements, 1995. Another edited work, The Spaces of the Modern City, Imaginaries, Politics and Everyday Life, 2008. And a third edited work, Neue Urbanism, Dystopic Images of the Modern City, appeared in 2010. Next important figure is Dipesh Chakravarti, who was born in 1948, an Indian historian who has also made contributions to postcolonial theory and subaltern studies. He is the Lawrence A. Kimpton Distinguished Service Professor in History at the University of Chicago and is a recipient of the 2014 Toynbee Prize that recognizes social scientists for significant academic and public contributions to humanity. And he is a member of the Subaltern Studies Collective and made significant contributions to the intersections between history and postcolonial theory. His important work, Provincializing Europe, continues and revises his earlier historical work on working class history in Bengal, that is, Rethinking Working Class History. And this particular work also modifies the debate of how postcolonial discourse engages in the writing of history, critiquing historicism, which is intimately related to the West's notion of linear time. He argues that Western historiography's historicism universalizes liberalism, projecting it to all ends of the map. He suggests that, under the rubric of historicism, the end goal of every society is to develop towards nationalism. And in relation with new historicism, you are expected to go through his article, Post-Coloniality and the Artifice of History, Who Speaks for Indian Past? And important works are Rethinking Working Class History, appeared in 1989, Provincializing Europe, Postcolonial Thought and Historical Difference, 2000, Habitations of Modernity, Essays in the Wake of Subaltern Studies, 2002, The Crisis of Civilization, Exploring on Global and Planetary Histories, 2018. Now let's move on to some key Foucauldian concepts. Of course, the first one is discourse. We have already discussed it. Again, as Foucault himself admits, it's a rather slippery notion. At the most basic level, Foucault uses the term to refer to the material verbal traces left by history. He also uses it to describe a certain way of speaking. 2. Discursive formation. It is roughly an equivalent to a scientific discipline. 3. Discursive practice. It refers to a historically and culturally specific set of rules for organizing and producing different forms of knowledge. It's not a matter of external determinations being imposed on people's thoughts. Rather, it's a matter of rules which, a bit like the grammar of a language, allow certain statements to be made. And non-discursive practices. In the archaeology of knowledge, Foucault lists non-discursive practices as including institutions, political events, economic practices, and processes. Page 162. He also argues that discourse does not underlie all cultural forms. Forms such as art and music are not discursive. He thinks that there is nothing to be gained from describing this autonomous layer of discourses unless one can relate it to other layers, practices, institutions, social relations, political relations, and so on. Fifth one is apparatus or dispositive. Foucault generally uses a term to indicate the various institutional, physical, and administrative mechanisms and knowledge structures which enhance and maintain the exercise of power within the social body. The original French term dispositif is rendered variously as dispositif, apparatus, and deployment in English translation of Foucault's work. 6.1 Archaeology. The term Foucault used during the 1960s to describe his approach to writing history. Archaeology is about examining the discursive traces and orders left by the past in order to write a history of the present. In other words, archaeology is about looking at history as a way of understanding the processes that have led to what we are today. 7. Archaeology vs. Genealogy. Foucault's remarks on the difference between archaeology and genealogy are generally rather vague and confusing. The tools Foucault uses to practice both methods are to all intents and purposes the same. But if archaeology addresses a level at which differences and similarities are determined, a level where things are simply organized to produce manageable forms of knowledge, the stakes are much higher for genealogy. Genealogy deals with precisely the same substrate of knowledge and culture, but Foucault now describes it as a level where the grounds of the true and the false come to be distinguished via mechanisms of power.